Senate Drug Caucus hearing on the illegal drug trade in Afghanistan. Poppy production there reached record levels last year, with millions of dollars being funneled to the Taliban. Officials from the state and defense departments and the Drug Enforcement Administration testified about how the fight against illegal drugs will be affected by the U.S. troop withdrawal. This is a little more than an hour.
Here today to discuss a problem that has no easy solution. Yet, we ignore it at our peril. It's the Afghan drug trade. It contributes to nearly every problem Afghanistan faces. The narcotics trade funds the Taliban, it increases corruption, and it poses a serious public health challenge in Afghanistan and abroad. As the United States draw down their troops in the country, we must find a way to sustain our counter-narcotics efforts and improve those policies that have not worked as well as we might, or as well as they should, and we need to improve them. Unfortunately, there is little good news coming out of this country on counter-narcotics. First, as you can see on the chart behind me, poppy cultivation reached a record level of 209,000 hectares in 2013. So it's up 36% from the 2012 level. That's over a third increase in 1 year. Second, the Taliban continues to finance its terrorist activities through the drug trade. Estimates suggest the Taliban receives between $100 and $150 million a year from narcotics-related activity, a significant portion of its estimated $400 million annual budget.
We noted that our private security in Afghanistan appears to be a major source of payoffs to the Taliban. Our report has the first official statement that it's the second largest source of money to the Taliban.
After drugs.
After drugs, that's right.
Co-Chairman Grassley and members of the caucus, thank you for the opportunity to testify about the perilous state of the U.S. counter-narcotics effort in Afghanistan. As you know, Chairman, at your request, on my most recent trip to Afghanistan, I met with numerous officials involved in the counter-narcotics program. In the opinion of almost everyone, the situation is dire, with little prospect for improvement this year or beyond, even with the signing of a bilateral security agreement. What I learned is echoed in the latest report of the Department of Defense to Congress, commonly called the 1230 report, where they note and find that overall insurgent funding from narcotics trafficking remained largely unchanged, that the Taliban had shown a greater propensity to protect the poppy harvest and regulate narcotics trafficking and production, that international law enforcement officers no longer had the same freedom of movement as in previous reports, just as we noted up there. Those are the areas where anyone under chief of mission status, including the military, except in exceptional circumstances, cannot go beyond those areas because they have to return within an hour, 30 minutes out and 30 minutes back, to a scheduled a hospital facility. So that basically limits not only the IG's GAO, but it also limits anybody in the under the chief of mission as well as DOD.
Of this committee, but very much related to drugs. You're the senior DEA official in charge of enforcement, and the department announced that they weren't going to enforce some drug laws in states that voted to have other type of marijuana policy. And a lot of this is finding its way into my state of Iowa, even though their state laws say it can't happen. What's your view on the department's new policy?
Thank you, Senator. The department put out a policy by which the U.S. attorneys and prosecutors would consider there 8 different factors in prosecuting cases relative to marijuana. Marijuana is a Schedule I controlled substance. It's illegal. So we're still enforcing the law. But I will tell you, I'm glad you asked me that, Senator, because I have to say this. I've been 27 years as a DEA agent, 34 years in federal government. A father of 6 great kids and a wife who's hung out with me for 32 years. I've been serving the country since I'm 18 years old. I have to tell you this. I have to, and I served in the great state of California for 9 years as a new agent. And I went with you to Redding, California. You don't remember, there was more hair here when we established an office up there for meth. I must tell you this, because it would be wrong for me to tell you. Going down the path to legalization in this country is reckless and irresponsible. The department has set up factors, sir, and I get that. I'm talking about the long-term impact of legalization in the United States. It scares us. The treatment people are afraid. The education people are afraid. Law enforcement is worried what is going to happen. In every part of the world where this experiment has been tried, it has failed time and time again. And here we are. The voters have decided to do this. It's going to impact the state, the surrounding states, and California's done, ma'am. You know that. California's turned around and done a lot of great things, what they're doing, what they're seeing, and I wish some people would take example of what's happening. There are more dispensaries in Denver than there are Starbucks.
I think you're telling me that federal law ought to be enforced.
What I'm saying, sir, is the idea somehow that people have in our country, and to the extent that some legislators do, county elected officials do, that this is somehow good for us as a nation, sir. That this is good for the next generation of Americans coming up is wrong. It is a bad thing. And this body will get its door knocked on 10 years from now and say, how did we get where we get? People are going to ask us 10 years from now, how did we get where we're getting? And can I just put it in context with Afghanistan? At the International Drug Enforcement Conference that was held in Moscow, which is a planning and an operational meeting that we have every year, where we partner with new partners. Last year we were in Moscow, 100 different nations. Can I tell you, we're sitting there, the administrator and I meeting with everyone, whether they be political leaders or law enforcement leaders. Almost everyone looked at us and said, why are you doing this? You're pointing the finger at us as a source state, and yet you turn around. I have no answer for them. I don't have an answer for them. I just don't. In 27 years ago, working in Washington Heights as a young agent, senior agents told me we could never work with Colombia.
Working for Central Intelligence. And that turns out to be absolutely true.
According to later testimony, the drugs were sent to the U.S. as part of a covert CIA scheme to infiltrate Colombian drug gangs operating in Miami. Sound crazy? Not as crazy as what happened to the ton of cocaine. 3 years after the incident, the CIA publicly revealed that the seized drugs ended up being sold on the streets of America.
Woolsey, the head of the CIA, went around the country saying, it was a joint intelligence operation that went awry.
But how could impounded drugs end up on the streets of America? Or perhaps more importantly, why?
And I tend to agree. I oppose the legalization of marijuana in California with most of law enforcement. We beat it back that time. Whether we'll beat it back the next time, I have no clue. I believe that it is the wrong thing to do socially. I believe that it is a gateway drug. I believe that it leads to other things, and the fronting for methamphetamine is one of them. It's one thing to use it with a doctor's prescription to ease pain, particularly in a terminal situation. I understand that. And there are probably components of certain kinds of marijuana that can be used to treat babies medically. We're seeing that happen. But to say it should be used socially on an ongoing and robust basis, and I think, your analogy that there are more marijuana stores in Denver, then Starbucks is an interesting one. I wanted to ask you, Bochco was the last person brought back and tried, and that was in 2009, right?
Yes, ma'am.
The Afghan government does not have extradition treaties with us, right?
Yes, ma'am. That's
So
correct.
have any big traffickers been brought back since by DEA for trial in the Southern District of New York?
Not since we know. We have not had anyone turned over to us since then. However,
A DEA person assigned to my
Yes,
office
ma'am, I know.
did great work. But he thought that this was one area where DEA could cooperate with Iran and that we could have some mutual efforts. And you could even run it through a third country. And the Iranians are very concerned about the opiate use.
absolutely.
And so are the Russians. Now, is there a possibility, in your view, of putting together some kind of coalition between us, Afghanistan, the Iranians, and the Russians?
Without a doubt, with the Russians, and we are working with the Russians already. With the Iranians, I know our people on the ground, with the permission from the state, had discussions with some of the Iranians in the past before. The discussions are very limited. There were some issues of
But what about just DEA doing that?
with the Iranians.
Yeah.
We would seek the guidance from the department, obviously, and state. But I don't have. We don't. One of the things you well know, senators, anywhere around the globe, as a law enforcement officer, we're able to sometimes breach those. People are worried about the U.S. presence here, and we look at it as we're the dope cops here.
But was Oliver North's testimony before Congress the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Or was it, as conspiracy theorists believe, part of an elaborate cover-up? One that was connected to the tragic plane crash in the Nicaraguan rainforest.
That plane that was shot down had been owned by a major drug trafficker named Barry Seal. He sold the plane to the U.S. government, and U.S. officials feared that if the focus remained on that plane, it could result in a major scandal if the drug connection to the Contra War became fully known by the American public.
The reality of the Iran-Contra affair is that aircraft loaded with weapons took off from airports in the southern United States and flew into Central America, where the guns were unloaded and the planes were then loaded with illegal narcotics. And these were then flown back to the United States.
I myself helped to refuel those planes that were loaded with cocaine going into the U.S., knowing the fact that they were going to be seized when they landed in the U.S. And every time I asked, well, what happened to the plane that we just refueled? He said, well, they changed the flight plan in the middle of the flight. And this happened 4, 5, 6 times. And I said, nah, there's something wrong with this picture.
Could the conspiracy theorists be correct? Is this the real secret of the Iran-Contra affair? And it wasn't just arms for hostages, but drugs for arms as well.
In January of 1986, George H.W. Bush came to Guatemala, and I said, we do have some intelligence that the Contras are heavily involved in drug trafficking out of Ilopango Airport. And he smiled at me and didn't say a word, just shook my hand and walked away from me.
And I tend to agree. I oppose the legalization of marijuana in California with most of law enforcement. We beat it back that time. Whether we'll beat it back the next time, I have no clue. I believe that it is the wrong thing to do socially. I believe that it is a gateway drug. I believe that it leads to other things, and the fronting for methamphetamine is one of them. It's one thing to use it with a doctor's prescription to ease pain, particularly in a terminal situation. I understand that. And there are probably components of certain kinds of marijuana that can be used to treat babies medically. We're seeing that happen. But to say it should be used socially on an ongoing and robust basis. And I think, your analogy that there are more marijuana stores in Denver than Starbucks is an interesting one.
People think that DEA and the law enforcement offices around the world are interested in Billy and his bong and his basement. We're not. We never have been. That's his mother and father's problem. That's not the federal government's problem. That's not Jimmy Capper's problem at DEA. That's a mom and dad problem. What I'm interested in, what DEA has always been interested in, is the trafficking groups that want Billy to be puffing on his bong, the groups that are selling dope to our kids because they live off the backs of addiction. That's what they want.
That in the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, I do.
He admits before Congress that he lied to the American people, he lied to the committee.
By their very nature, covert operations or special activities are a lie.